Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this panel discussion on customer privacy, the journey from compliance to consumer trust. As you all know, our world is changing faster than we can imagine. And for businesses, customer data is at the center of innovation and the very core to developing new propositions, products, and experiences. So this session will discuss how businesses can focus less on compliance and more on managing personal information to create a stronger customer relationship. And we've got 4 people here who are ideally qualified to discuss this. I won't introduce them in detail. I'll simply give you their name and allow them to say hello and tell you what they do and why they're here. Mazen Kassis. Maz.
Thank you, Keith, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm here because I am interested in really engendering trust in our organisation, both in terms of the employees, the customers we serve, contractors, suppliers, etc. My background is in computer science and statistics. I have taken on privacy relatively recently in my career, but I have gone gung-ho and all in, neck deep. I am currently working in the retail industry, which is having a light shone upon it at present by government, and we really need to put extra focus on looking at the way we do things and have done things in the past, and seeing what we can do to optimize and design initiatives and products and services and experiences, etc., in a privacy-centric way. So it really is all about moving from compliance to trust. Looking forward to the chat.
Excellent. And Gehan Gunasekara. Gehan, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm an associate professor at the University of Auckland Business School in the Department of Commercial Law. And I specialize in data privacy law. I was also a member of the advisory group to the Law Commission, advising it on reform of the Privacy Act leading up to the 2020 legislation, which I helped in drafting. And my other work, I am also currently the chair of Privacy Foundation New Zealand, which is a not-for-profit organization some of you may have heard about, that lobbies for better privacy education and better privacy rights for New Zealanders. I should also say that I teach courses here at the University of Auckland on the Privacy Act, and I teach courses on information governance. And we have a 100% online program where you can study for a master's degree in information governance. And that's a brand new program. It's kicked off the end of last year, and I'm currently teaching on that program.
Thank you, Gehan. And Henna Taylor. Henna, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Henna, and I also work for Foodies alongside Maz. Currently, my role at Foodstuffs is I am the team leader for our New World team for the North Island, obviously looking after our customers in our stores on our e-commerce platform. I've got over 15 years of experience in retail, project management and leadership. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussions that we have today in regards to privacy, because I'm a big advocate for our company on ensuring that our customers' privacy is on top of our mind at all times.
Good for you. Thank you, Henna. And finally, the person who got us all together in the first place, Rali, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rali, and my expertise is in connecting the deep understanding of customer behavior and power of data. I have worked in FMCG and retail, specializing in marketing, customer data, and loyalty. I was leading the One Card loyalty program until last year. Currently, I work in the banking sector in the personalization space, and privacy and data ethics is a very important part of my work, a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Rali. And I'm Keith Norris. I'm a compliance consultant, mainly to those involved in marketing. I'm also on the advisory board of a data insights company appropriately called Data Insight Limited. And we turn data into business insights. Just to trump Gehan, you can see I'm a little bit older than some of you. I was part of a small group that helped Sir Bruce Slane introduce the Privacy Act in the early 1990s. So that's enough about us. Let's get on with the questions. First one, how do you feel New Zealand businesses are meeting the requirements of privacy, both legally, morally, and commercially? Can I start with you, Maz?
Let's take myself off mute. Look, I'm a recent immigrant, Keith, so I definitely am not the authority in the space relative to the experience of this panel. But my sense is that, much like the organization I work for, we are on a trajectory. My sense is that we're towards perhaps the beginning end of the trajectory, and the end, with the GDPR and the robustness of that sort of legislation as the ultimate end goal. My sense is that there's more work to do, but we are definitely on the way to a better place, particularly in light of the recent Privacy Act of 2020.
Thank you. Gehan, would you like to say something on that matter? How do you feel New Zealand businesses are meeting the requirements of the Act?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Mazen that I think we are, we have got some way to go. I think that progress has been made, but I think if we think back to some of the stories that came out during the pandemic, especially the first lockdown in 2020, where some businesses really struggled when they had all this information and they didn't know what to do with it. And their employees were taking the data home, and there's all sorts of terrible stories, which indicates that education is lacking among staff apart from anything else. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. We did a study here at the business school some years ago, so I'm hesitant to say that the conclusions from that study are still true to this day. But that study showed that there was a deficit. That was about 2014 or 2013. So it's a bit dated now, that research, but it showed that the New Zealand companies were lagging behind their even Australian companies, and certainly lagging behind multinational companies in terms of their compliance, not more than compliance, their actual maturity in terms of dealing with customer data. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's all negative. I think that there is some good work, and some companies are showing the way and really taking responsibility. But there is still a long way to go, and I think we all need to work a bit harder on that.
Thank you. Rali, did you want to make a contribution to this one?
Yes, just to build on the points Gehan and Maz mentioned, I do believe there's a lot of focus on compliance and fixing the basics, and this is dealing with legacy systems, mapping up where the data is, how the data are used. However, customer behavior is changing rapidly, and technology is changing even faster. And I do believe that we should start changing the conversations from compliance only to embedding privacy in business strategies and embedding privacy in customer experience as well, in customer journeys as well. What this looks like is how do we make it simple to the customer to understand actually what privacy is about and how their data are used? How do we give more control to privacy as well? So yes, I do believe there's a great focus on compliance and fixing the basics, but a lot more needs to be done for us to step change the way New Zealand businesses engage with customers.
Thank you. Yes. In my role, I spend a lot of time, particularly with members of the Marketing Association, looking at how they convey their attitude to customer privacy. And I must say that I believe the attitude has changed dramatically in particularly the last decade. But still, the formal compliance, the number of times I look on websites and people ask you, contact us, and you're asked to write in your details, your contact details, personal information. Where's the privacy statement? Where is the understanding of Principle 3, which says when you collect information, you must tell people you're collecting it, what you're going to do with it, how you're going to store it, etc. And that does seem to be lacking in the commercial world at the moment. But that's something for us to have a go at. Okay, next question. What is your view of New Zealand organisations' privacy management skills? By that, we mean, how good are we at informing the public that A, we're collecting their information, and B, how we're going to use it? How good are we? Gehan, would you like to start us on that one?
Oh, that's a tough one. Keith, I think it's about developing your competence, and it's not something that you can do overnight. And you know, the mistake is to assume that this is something that can just be delegated to one person in your organization, or you just hire somebody to do it for you. And in fact, it's much worse by just getting a professional person to do it. Then if you a whole organization as a whole takes responsibility for it, because the outsider may not know all the ins and outs of your organization and what it is that you do. So you really need a ground up kind of look at what is it we do, what data do we collect, before you start talking about communicating that to the outside world, because otherwise there's a mismatch. You might say we are doing X, Y, Z, but the reality is something quite different. And so you need to be very careful that you actually have that kind of grounded reality within your organization. Yeah. You can't just copy and paste, you know, some international template for privacy statements and so on. But although our Commissioner's Office has a very good tool you can use, and there are other people who provide tools. So by all means, use those. But the main thing I would say is to talk within that organization. Make sure you understand what is it you do, whose data are you collecting. And also don't forget, we have a new IPP, Keith mentioned IPP3, but there's a new IPP subclause 2 of principle 1. So IPP 1 subclause 2 now has a data minimization rule that you shouldn't even collect identifying information to begin with. That's challenging, I suspect, for many organizations. But it's a matter of really thinking and exercising some judgment. Do we even need to collect names and addresses? Do we even need identifying details? So it's about doing the mental calculations before you actually go about actually communicating. That's my take on it.
Yep, thank you, Gehan. Rali, I know you have something you want to say. And by the way, if any of the rest, just put your hand up if you want to signal somehow that I'll catch it and include you in the conversation. Rali, how do you feel we are at collecting information and telling people how we're going to use it?
I do believe we do a relatively good job in informing customers. However, a lot more needs to be done to make it easy and simple for customers to understand. I'll give you a few examples. Based on the recent survey I did on onboarding journeys and customer notices, I feel that customers need to have low degrees to be able to understand what we're talking about. And I see Gehan actually smiling. I don't have a low degrees, and I had actually a lot of challenges understanding what companies do with my information. Another example is some of the consent I provided when I registered for the services was not respected, and my preferences were not reflected in my profile. And this is actually, you know, that means the company will contact me via channels that I have not explicitly agreed to. And simplicity, another example, I registered for a service, and however, if I want to unsubscribe from communication, I need to email 4 or 5 different organizations because there is a partnership within the service. So definitely not easy. So this is dark patterns where we don't make things easy for customers, and they're widely used, unfortunately, globally in New Zealand as well. My belief is that privacy is not just the job of the legal team and compliance team. Marketeers and customer experience experts need to get involved and make it really easy for customers to understand how their data is used. And if we have marketeers on the call, just reflect that sometimes the first time customer interacts with a brand is when they register for a new service or through the onboarding journey. This is the moment of truth to build brand trust. And based on some academic research globally, it's actually proven that if we make it easy for customers and we provide more control, we're building customer trust, and customers will share more information with us and we engage better with the services. So a lot of work to be done in this space, Kit, to make it much simpler for customers and the team members as well.
Yeah.
May I jump in there just with a comment? Look, I agree with pretty much the sentiment. I just want to try and give perhaps a more positive spin. And again, Hannah's on the call, and she would have a plethora of real world experiences that she can speak to highlight this. But my sense, given now I'm really involved in the privacy space every day, I'm having privacy conversations internal to the organization within the retail FMCG industry and beyond. I truly do get the sense that people, employees of organizations are really taking privacy more seriously. They're more cognizant of it. They may not necessarily have all the answers, but they definitely are more attracted to thinking about privacy earlier as a general thing. Of course, we've still got more ways to go, but that for me gives me a good sense that there's the future is going to be a brighter one in that respect. And I think much of that, at least in my experience, is to do with the work of the OPC, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, particularly under the previous Mr. Edwards. I think he had a monumental impact in my own daily relationship with privacy, as well as within our organisation. And the other thing is, I think people are becoming more attuned to the general sense out there that people, our compatriots, have an increasing understanding of, awareness of, and interest in the privacy space. I'm getting much less of the, who cares, I've got nothing to hide, and more of the, actually, privacy is precious, my privacy is precious, so is yours, and we need to ensure that we take measures to protect it. So for me, it's tending towards a more positive direction from a sentiment perspective, but from a real world technical and otherwise perspective, there's definitely more to go.
Can I just jump in, Keith?
Go ahead, Gehan.
I agree with what Mazen just said. There's a reputational risk to companies, more than just a pure legal risk. But I also agree with what Rali said regarding accessibility. You have privacy statements and things like that, and drafted in obscure legal language. It must be comprehensible to the ordinary person, and it must be able to be accessed even on a remote on a mobile device. I mean, you have a box that people have to tick to say, I agree to your privacy policy or something like that. But if the words of the privacy policy are so small that even with a magnifying glass you can't see what they are, then how real is that tick? The tick is, in my view, meaningless, because people would say, well, even though the person ticked it, they just did it to get access to the service or the app, but they really couldn't have even read the terms if they had wanted to. So I think you've got to be very careful and do things like layering your statement to have the key points at a glance, and then maybe a link to the full policy somewhere else. So things like that can make a big difference. And people will say, oh, these guys have thought about their privacy statement. They've actually intelligently drafted it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. You mentioned, I'll come to you, Hannah.
Thank you.
You mentioned tick boxes. I hate tick boxes. And so do the public. They never know whether they're ticking to say yes or ticking to say no. And so I recommend all the time, avoid a tick box, make a statement, make a clear statement, and direct people to your total privacy policy. Hannah, sorry, we kept you out of
Thank you.
your
It's
turn.
okay. I think a big part that people need to consider too, in my experience, is predominantly 80% of your customer database aren't going to read your privacy policy. They are going to do just what Keith's talking about. They're going to check that tick box so they can carry on with their shopping journey. And so I think it's really important that you train your staff who are on the floor or virtually, so they understand your privacy policy, what it's about. When they get those questions, they can explain that to your customers so that then they have confidence in what they have agreed to as well. I think it's a really, really significant part that a lot more people need to go in and do with their team members, because you're right, it is like you need to be a lawyer to understand a privacy policy for most companies, and half the time I do it myself, I may not read it, and that's because you don't have time or you just think it's stock standard, but that might not be the case. So I think it is really important that staff members need to have a clear understanding of that too.
So what you just said, I want to extend that into the next question. How can we ensure our customer-facing teams, like your contact centers, who are really at the face of the company, how can we train them? How can we help them not become overwhelmed with the legal side, but to understand what people want, what we want as individuals in terms of information about our privacy and our details? How do you go about it in your...
I think from my experience, I've noticed that customer privacy and customers being more concerned about it as well has kind of been increasing over the last 10 years. So I think that the best thing to do is to start off at the ground with your team first of all. And it's not just a one-man gang type situation. You have multiple people in different areas of the business that are focused on privacy. But from a service perspective, to help our customers understand, it's good for your staff to understand the importance of privacy. So running seminars with them, running little workshops, so with real life scenarios, situations that relate to any type of retail, and why it's important to protect customer data is really vital for your teams. And it's good because when you think about it, who's going to pick up the phone or the email or be on the floor when that question from a customer comes through? It's not going to be one of us. It's going to be one of our staff members. So they need to be equipped with that information, or be equipped to understand this could be an issue, or is this something I need to raise, and have an understanding of different situations so they can raise different scenarios that we may not have come across before, because the world is ever changing with privacy. So I do think it's really important, and I would even go as far as hosting workshops every 3 to 4 months with teams, to make sure they're still on top of it, reminders, showing them the real life scenarios. I think it's very, very important that we focus on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not aware of any public availability of online seminars. Is that because I've not been alerted to them, or is anyone aware of any online methodology? And I say that because SMEs very often, I'm talking about small companies, sort of 10 to 20 people, they don't have the facility to run seminars. They don't have anybody to come and talk to them. There ought to be more, I think, more availability of information on not necessarily the law per se, but how to interpret it, how to respect people's feelings about their own personal information. Is there anything? And if anybody in the audience knows of anything, please put it up and let us know.
Keith, I'll just jump in if I may. I mean, speaking from personal experience, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner's free stuff has come in super, super handy for us. For me personally, but also for use within our organization as something that people can go to and that we can register that they've gone to and done the work as a basis of forming some sort of level of comprehension or awareness of that stuff. And I've found it really, really invaluable. So if people aren't aware of that, I strongly suggest that they make themselves aware.
Can I just also add to that? Sorry, go ahead. Did somebody have something?
Oh, you first, Gehan.
Okay,
then you.
All right. Just very quickly, again, reinforcing what Mazen just said, that the OPC, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, does some outstanding work, and that's their service responsibility. But the sad reality is that everybody else, including myself, basically making money out of it. So, you know, we live in a commercial world and people don't give seminars for free. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. You know, you have to register at some educational institution to get these skills. Now, the organization that I currently lead, the Privacy Foundation, we would like to do more sort of community type of activities and free educational seminars and so on. But our organization runs on the smell of an oily rag. we don't have any funding at all. So, if a big commercial organization like Foodstuffs were prepared to sort of fund us to run some free seminars, then yes, we would certainly put them on. But the reality is, unfortunately, there's the people offering courses, but generally you have to pay to attend that.
Yeah, we can talk offline.
Rali, you have something to say?
Well, I wanted to probably build on Henna's point that there's a lot of, there will be seminars focusing on the Privacy Act and good principles, etc. For me, the most important thing is that this content is adapted to the needs and the audience. So what the content will look like for a contact center will be very different than if the audience is a marketing team or a customer experience team.
Yeah.
And that for me is the opportunity. How do we start changing the conversation and focus on legal and compliance and adapting this content, making it more accessible and actually involving everybody in this conversation?
Thanks for that, Rali. And Gehan, if any of the people in the foundation are members of the Marketing Association, they do get free seminars, conducted by yours truly, no less.
Right, yeah, of course.
So what do businesses need to do to evolve the conversation from compliance towards building customer trust? Who wants to start on that one? What do businesses need to do to put the compliance aside and really understand how they can use the relationship and the information that they have to build customer trust?
Keith, I'll start it off if that's okay.
Thank you, Maz.
Okay, so I'll talk about a specific example because I'm not a representative of all businesses, but in this context, what we have done that has proven really, really useful is to introduce the concepts of privacy threshold analyses and privacy impact statements as part of the project or initiative lifecycle process. So when an initiative or a project or whatever you want to call it starts off, in order for something to get funding now within our organization, we've sort of inserted a process where we ask the question around privacy and whether there's personal information involved, and if so, has either a PTA or a PIA been done. That was a quick and easy way to try and address a broader problem of trying to enhance privacy by design principles and practices in the organization, but we found that really, really useful. Every day, I'm getting questions from project managers, from people across the business, some of which I'm familiar with, some of which I'm not, that said, look, Maz, we've just come to terms with this thing now. Can you help us digest it, what's involved? And it has led to changes in designs of certain things so that they become more privacy centric. So if there is a single way, in my experience, that has been one of the most effective ways to try and improve and embed better practice.
Thanks. Rali, have you got something to add to that?
Well, I will come back to how do we make privacy more accessible, and compliance is for me is the start, is the given, and the opportunity is to move to customer experience and improving customer experience and building trust. So if we think about onboarding journeys as the first touch point for brand interaction, marketeers, you guys have a fantastic opportunity to think differently and simplify the communication and the way we engage with customers. So more people should be involved. Simplicity, not just privacy statements, training, the way we talk to customers, the way we present information. Customers want to know how the information is used. And if we're transparent with them, that builds customer trust as well. So again, for me is more people getting involved and really moving to customer experience and brand.
So you talked about onboarding journeys. A lot of the people listening, I suspect, are not marketers and they might not assimilate that. In layman's language, what are you talking about with onboarding journeys?
Great question, Kate. So when I register for a new service and provide my personal information, agree to terms and conditions, when I agree or set up my preferences, if I want to receive communication by email or direct mail, all of this is part of the first moments of truth when a customer engages with a brand or organization. Once I have registered for this service, usually we receive welcome emails with more information about the brand, how do we use the services, specific offers. So all of this is part of onboarding journey for any service and new product. And at the moment, consent is provided in the beginning when customers register for the service. Privacy policy is again in the beginning of the journey. And then customers, literally, they don't have idea what's happening with their data and how the information is used. So enhancing the onboarding journey, thinking differently about communication and simplicity, we will definitely build trust, and we definitely make it simple for customers as well.
Thank you. And in passing, I should thank Jenny Leith, who came through also with the statement that the OPC have very good training facilities. And Gloria Gomez, I didn't quite get your comments, so I'm hoping that the Privacy Commissioner is going to catch up on those. And the same with your comment, Ian. Thank you for your contribution. We'll move on now. Here's one for you. This will get you all going. Do you think our privacy laws are adequate? Or should we be following stricter lines, for instance, like the European Union with GDPR? I can see Gehan smiling. Come on, it's your go.
Okay, all right. First of all, a lot of businesses in New Zealand are confused. They've heard about the GDPR, but they're not so hot on the Privacy Act. Now, remember, the Privacy Act is what applies in New Zealand, not GDPR. And unless you're one of those organizations that has some linkage to Europe, and you need to be careful because there's an extraterritoriality clause in the GDPR, which means, you know, anyone who is offering goods or services within the European Union needs to comply. But we also now have extraterritoriality in our law. So anyone, it's a reciprocal thing. Foreign companies who are doing business in New Zealand, carrying on business, must comply with our act. So our act is coming increasingly in alignment with GDPR. But that said, GDPR is much stricter. There's much more onerous standards required in GDPR. And if you're doing business in Europe, then it's a good idea to comply with GDPR anyway. But otherwise, it's a good practice. It might be one thing you might think about. We can improve and show that we are being more responsible. I would pick a couple of areas. One of them is the degree of transparency when you are collecting information, for example, from third parties. GDPR is quite strict about that. You can't just say, I'm going to complete my data set by going and filling out information about you from somebody else. That's not really allowed under GDPR. And in New Zealand, it needs specific authorization by the individual, so just putting it on a privacy statement is not enough. You actually have to have something where you can show the person has ticked a box to authorize collection of data from a third party. But the other area I would focus on is a right to be forgotten. We don't have the right to be forgotten in New Zealand. It's arguable that data should not be held for an unreasonable amount of time. But one of the things New Zealand agencies should be doing is having data retention schedules. They should all consider how long are we keeping this data, and we should regularly purge data. And there's a good reason for doing that, because if you hold on to vast amounts of data, it's only a matter of time before a hacker gets in and there's a data breach, and then you are in big trouble. So it's actually in your interest to progressively delete data and have data retention schedules. I wonder how many organizations in New Zealand are actually doing that. In the case of GDPR, it's a requirement. So those are just two things that I would focus on.
If I may expand on that one point that you made, how long should you keep the data? And I often get asked this by people in business, how long? And so I try to, and I had the same conversation with both Blair and the Privacy Commissioner, and neither of them really gave me an answer that I was totally satisfied with, because I say, oh, Gehan, you're not a customer of my company yet, but I want you to be a customer. And that's why I've somehow been authorized to collect your information. So that's the start of it. When you become a customer, obviously I need to keep you on my books. And if you should go and leave and join or take your business to an opposing company, I really want to get you back. So I don't want to lose your data because I still want to keep in touch if you allow me to. So how long is that? And so I don't ever have a quantifiable answer to anyone. I just say, use your judgment. Is it relevant? Would you expect the same if you were the customer and not the business? But I still don't think it's a very satisfactory answer that I'm giving people.
Yeah, Keith, that's a very good point. And it's like, how long is a piece of string? And it's, you know, you get into these kinds of issues, but it's not as difficult as it might sound, because we have an Unsolicited Electronic Transactions Act in New Zealand, the Spam Act.
Yeah.
And that's in many ways easier to interpret. And the interpretations of that, you look at how long you've had a reasonable relationship with the customer. So if you don't hear from me for, say, 5 years or 4 years, you know, if you've had regular correspondence and from time to time I've sent emails or communications inquiring about your product, you might think, well, I might be a possible customer. But if I've sent you an email saying I no longer want to be your customer, I'm now with a competitor, and then I don't respond to marketing emails from you, and you haven't heard from me for 5 years, I would say, well, then I think you have to admit at some point that that data should really be purged. I'm no longer your customer. That's how I would handle it.
Yep, absolutely agree. And who else wants to make a statement about whether we should be closer to? Thank you, Henna.
I just wanted to touch base on what we've been saying in regards to how long we should hold customer data for. Over the years that I've been working in retail and different businesses, it's roughly about 5 years that we've been told. But my personal opinion is, if a customer has said they do not no longer want to be a customer of ours, we shouldn't hold any data on them unless it's for transactional purposes where something might happen down the road, which, by the way, is a lot shorter term than 5 years, that we need to help them with something. Other than that, if they have requested for us to delete them, to remove them from our system, I personally feel that all record of them should be removed because that's what they've asked.
And just going back to the right to be forgotten, this is where legislation, even in New Zealand, is way, way behind self-regulation. Within the Code of Practice for Direct Marketing, since the 1990s, there has been a requisite that you have the right to opt out at any time. And that's part of building customer trust, isn't it? Saying, look, we're collecting this information. We want to tell you about our marvelous products and services. But at any time, you have the right to opt out. And then the onus is on the company to respect that and opt people out. So that's pretty much in line with what you said, Henna.
Keith,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on the point about GDPR, it seems to me that there's nothing stopping us or organizations from adhering or aspiring to GDPR practices within this country, even though technically in some instances it may not apply. Like in our circumstance, GDPR does not apply to our organization, but when we're designing things, we're designing them with the things like Gehan mentioned, the right to be forgotten, all of this stuff intrinsically into the design. So it doesn't happen always, and it doesn't necessarily happen consistently, but yeah, to my mind, there isn't anything stopping us from taking the GDPR example and aspiring to that and embedding in practices in our organization that will get us closer to where GDPR is, because I suspect, as I mentioned at the outset of the discussion, that's where the world is heading anyway. Might as well get a head start.
Thanks. Rali, you've been waiting patiently.
No, I just agree with what Gehan and Mazen and Henna was saying. 90% of countries will have GDPR-like legislation in the next several years. Yes, New Zealand has a different legislation, different requirements. However, customer expectations to respect data ethical use is everywhere. And let's be very honest, New Zealand is part of global community. We use global suppliers to provide technology platforms, data platforms, customer services as well. So all of these good practices of data governance, protection, use are embedded in the new platform. So if there's an opportunity to aspire to do better, we definitely should take these opportunities.
Thank you. And I'll go on with one. Gloria has come up with several suggestions, including, Gloria, thank you for your involvement. She is definitely moving her company towards GDPR. So just to wind that one question up, do you think GDPR is superior to the New Zealand Privacy Act? And I'm talking about for New Zealand. Anybody? Well, my opinion is it isn't. I like the way our Privacy Act is phrased. I think it adequately protects people, but it does it in a way that leaves business and organizations generally, as long as they follow the 13 IPPs, they are acting with conscience and respectful of people's individual privacy. But here's one that's dear to my heart. Do you know that over 150,000 New Zealanders don't want any kind of unsolicited marketing communication by mail or by phone? Do we respect their wishes enough? Do you think?
No. That's my answer.
Go on, Hannah.
More underscore that.
No, I think that's a big thing that I've dealt with in my career, has been complaints from your customers or clients and regarding that they are just bombarded with marketing activity. And the reason they feel bombarded is because, especially if they're doing if they're shopping, say, through an e-commerce platform, they're going to get 3-4 different emails about tracking, confirmation, etc. And then in the month of May, they might get X amount about different promotions or specials that a company may have going on. And then you tie into the fact that they're probably in their inbox getting a lot of emails from different companies as well. So it might not necessarily be a reflection on your company that you're bombarding them too much, but it is how it feels at the time because they're getting it everywhere. So I think it's really important for companies to, I do think people need to restrict the amount that they communicate with their customers regarding marketing material. And I do think that there is still a small percentage of people in the country that prefer, say, a paper mailer as opposed to an email. So I think it's really good for companies to do the research, understand what their customer database is, who they are, and understand how often they're communicating to them and target their marketing to them, to their shopping experience or to what they're about with that company, because you'll have different customers for different areas that are having different needs. So if you can find that niche and target to them for that, I think you'd see a reduction in complaints about how much they do receive.
Mm-hmm. Mazen or Rali, anything to add to that?
No, spot on, Hannah. Well done.
Can I, sorry, I'll just add something.
Yes, you may. Gehan, go ahead.
Just on that point, I find that New Zealand companies generally do comply with the Unsolicited Transactions Act. I mean, you have a unsubscribe link and all the rest of it. But the problem is that a lot of stuff comes from offshore, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. And I don't think we still have a solution to that. If anyone has a solution, I'd be very interested to hear what it is.
Now, you're absolutely right, particularly in where there are call center companies who operate as a service company on behalf of New Zealand company, and they're calling from Manila or from Mumbai, and it really is difficult to control that. But there's one other area that I want to bring up. 30,000 New Zealanders every year are no longer in a position to receive either a call or a piece of mail because they died. So few people have access to the deaths register. It took me 9 years to negotiate access to the deaths information. I thought I was going to be on the information list before I got hold of it. But now, that's available and not enough people use it. The Marketing Association has very, very strict supplementary guidelines and agreements. It can only be used for suppression. The information on the deaths register can only be used to suppress the names of people who have died. And how good that is, I'm sure, for the families of people. I, for instance, had more than once, I've had a widow ring me to tell me she just received a life insurance application for her husband. That must really cut to the deep in terms of family relationships. So there are ways of avoiding sending mail or telephone calls to people who A, don't want them, or B, are no longer in a position. And if you want to know about them, get in touch with me, keith@marketing.org.nz. You have my permission. We are just coming to the very end. And so I'm going to ask you if you'd like to make any last statement to the lovely 100 people plus who are still listening to us. Gehan, you must have a message. I know you do.
Well, I'm passionate about privacy, and so I don't think we should give up and say it's all too difficult. We'll just give all our data, because that serves the interests of the large corporations, especially not just New Zealand businesses, but we know that that data is then going to end up, in the hands of Google and Facebook and Amazon and the like. So I think we have to keep working to protect our data, and New Zealand companies should show the way, and we should set the best practice examples, and then put pressure on everyone else to follow our example.
Thank you very much. Anyone else with the last statement to make?
If I may, Keith, yeah, I just want to say that it's a team sport, right? People on this call have an obvious interest in the space. There are groups, a number of them that I've recently become aware of and joined, IAPP, Port, etc. If you're not already members of those, join them, because there are so many others, like-minded individuals on there, people in the same stretch of the journey. You can share war stories, you can learn from their experiences. I've really found those sort of communities really useful, and I would strongly encourage participation.
Thank you. Rali, this was your concept, so you get last word.
Well, let's start moving from compliance to customer experience. Let's starting having conversations with marketeers, simplifying the language, looking onboarding journeys, and getting more people involved. For me, probably this is the starting point. Let's start changing the conversation and make it much simpler for customers and team.
Thank you very much. And to all of you out there, thank you so much for being with us for the last 45 minutes. That's all we were allocated by the Privacy Commissioner. I suspect we could go on for a lot longer, and we could do something similar in the future. Thank you all for being part of it. Have a good Friday, and especially a good weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.